And we're live.
All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Pillar 4 Advisory Committee meeting. We are excited to have a lot of new members to introduce to you today, and for us to get to know each other. And so we're going to jump right into our agenda and start with that welcome. And so I'm going to pass it over to Lisa to let us walk through our new members, and we'll all introduce ourselves so that everybody gets to know each other, and also to get updates from the AIB.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ellie. And thank you to Executive Assistant Shawanda for her behind the scenes support. Okay, so we're going to welcome our new Pillar 4 Advisory Committee members. I'm going to introduce the new members, and then I would like for you each to say a little bit about yourselves and tell us your connection to Pillar 4 and the blueprint. So we're going to begin with the first new member, Jessica Grant. Dr. Grant, are you there?
She's not.
Okay. Thank you, Hope. All right, then we'll go to the next new member, Shalita Jones.
Hi, my name is Shalita Jones. I am a school-based speech language pathologist, and my connection. Um, so I've been working in the field for approximately 10 years, a whole decade. And so I've worked in different settings, including public and non-public. And so my connection is looking at it, um, the support in how, sorry, I kind of put it on the spot. I'm trying to come up with some stuff. So um yeah, so just suppo- providing that support in student accessibility. And so how can I support that coming from a language base, from a communication base, that may look at it from a different lens than maybe a teacher or administrator. So looking at it from a communication piece or a language piece or even a speech piece, where they're looking at how articulation or the language that they use and how can we kind of generate that into supporting the students and supporting the community and also supporting the educators as well. Is there anything else I was supposed to say? Okay, I apologize. But yeah.
No, that was perfect.
Okay. Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you. Okay. All right. And now for our I call them the special members, the student members of the committee. Uh Kadeen, if you could tell us what county you reside in and what school you go to and why you were interested in Pillar 4.
Hi, my name's Kadeem Bell, and I live in Caroline County, and I go to North Carolina High School. And I was interested in Pillar 4 because I'm a student myself, and I got involved from hearing about it from something called the American Youth Association. They were kind of connected with you guys, and I'm also the student member on the board for my county, for the north side of my county. So I really just want to be able to know what students need to better them with their education that they can't really voice, but adults may not know. And being a student, I feel like it's easier to do that because I'm always around them and I'm a student myself.
Oh, excellent, Kadeen. I love that. You're so civically engaged already. That's wonderful. Okay. And now we're going to go back to Dr. Jessica Grant.
So I ask for your forgiveness. This is, of course, a crazy time right now. I'm in my building and it's dismissal, and there was a bus issue, so I had to step away. But I thank you for your patience. And if you could let me know what I need to say and do,
Yes.
I'm on it.
Well, we're so thankful for your time and that you're here. And tell us a little bit about yourself and about your connection to Pillar 4 and the Blueprint.
So thank you so much. I am Dr. Jessica Grant. I'm the proud principal of James Vidal Randall Elementary School here in Clinton, Maryland, Prince George's County Public Schools. This is my 3rd year as an elementary school principal. Of course, this is our 2nd day of school. And so it's been an exciting time, just getting back to the routine, especially this new bus process we have in place. I'm excited to be a part of this process and contribute any way that I can. My connection to Pillar 4 is I am a new community school coordinator, so a new community school, excuse me. And so with that being said, I am looking for ways to enhance and support programs that we have here, support our scholars and our families in order for them to gain that level of understanding that they need and not have any distractors that will cause them to miss out on their educational gains. Biggest issue that I'm noticing that families need support in is just, just normal daily uniforms, making sure students are able to get to school every day. A lot of my scholars or some scholars may reside with grandparents or in other environments. And so they need just a lot of support when it comes to just daily task, getting students to school. And so that's one way that I've really connected to Pillar 4 and looking at those support systems that we can put in place to help scholars to have some sort of accessibility to the learning and to help families because they need the support. So just want to add that in.
Thank you, Dr. Grant. Thank you for your dedication to your school and your community. All right. Now, we want to give these new members a warm welcome. And here's my warm welcome. And we are delighted to have you join us, and we look forward to your valuable contributions. And with that being said, we want to expressly say a huge, big thank you to our departing Pillar 4 members, Dawn Jacobs Martin, Chair Chandra Krantz, and student member Jaden Ferris for their commitment to the Blueprint and their valued partnership all that time. Okay, throwing it back to you, Ellie.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And it's just to kind of round out introductions. I think I would like both Joe and Hope to introduce themselves, and I will say a few words about who I am. I was the vice chair for the last group. I'm the director of the Maryland Out of School Time Network, and we also serve as the backbone for the Maryland Coalition for Community Schools here in Maryland. And I know part of our agenda business later on will be that we also need to elect a new chair, vice chair amongst this group, so we can have that conversation a little bit later. But also I wanted to let you kind of get to know Joe, who's our AIB official board member, who's the representative to this group, and let Hope also introduce herself.
You want to
take it away?
Hope, would you like to go first, or? Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Joseph Mako. I currently serve as the Education Program Officer at the ABLE Foundation. I'm also one of the members of the Accountability and Implementation Board. And then prior to joining my job at ABLE, I worked for 18 years with Baltimore City Public Schools, first as a 6th and 7th grade social studies teacher, and then technology coordinator, and then for 10 years as a elementary school principal of a community school in Northwest Baltimore.
Good afternoon, everyone. Grateful to have new members. definitely excited about the work that we'll do together. My name is Hope McGuire. I am the supervisor of community schools in Montgomery County Public Schools, where we have 53 community schools for this upcoming year. And then prior to that, I have also worked in PG County and Baltimore County Public Schools as a charter school principal and also in the Title I office and as an administrator as well. So I totally understand that second day of school and bus dismissal. So thank you for being here. I also know all about SLP as I had a child who best friend was the SLP. So I'm grateful to have this diverse body and definitely grateful to have a student voice on here that is through the American Youth part. So welcome. And my main thing is joining this committee is definitely staying focused on how we can have evidence of impact over evidence of activities.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. All right, Lisa, I'm going to pass it back to you to get the update from the AIB, and then we'll jump into a discussion with Emma.
Okay, great. Here are the AIB updates as they pertain to all things Pillar 4. For the school year 2024-2025, Maryland will have a statewide total number of community schools at 621. This is a major increase of 160 eligible community schools, and it is mostly derived from the newest addition of middle schools and high schools. Furthermore, with that, the new additions, all schools across the Dorchester County Public School System will be designated as community schools. This designation represents an opportunity for research and analysis of the strengths and weaknesses of this key blueprint initiative. All right, now turning to school behavioral health. As you all know, the Maryland Consortium on Coordinated Community Supports, along with the Maryland Community Health Resource Commission, provided new grant funding to the total of $111 million to expand access to comprehensive behavioral health services for children, kindergarten through high school, in every school district in Maryland. The grant award programs will address a wide range of behavioral health issues through prevention, behavioral health screenings, counseling, addiction treatment, family support, crisis planning and services, telehealth services, support groups, and wraparound services for pre-K. Excuse me, I said kindergarten earlier, but it's actually pre-K through high school students and their families. And we are happy to report that the consortium is up and running with their hubs and their grant awardees. And finally, the Special Education Work Group submitted their interim report that is due to the AIB ahead of schedule. And in it, there are 8 overarching recommendations proposed. And the AIB is in the process of reading and reviewing the proposed recommendations and the full report. And we look forward to providing feedback on that soon. And right now, those are the updates for Pillar 4.
Thank you, Lisa. Does anybody have any questions for Lisa? I'm going to take my hefty pause and then. All right. It seems as though no questions right now. Before we jump into the conversation with Emma, and this was one that we had scheduled a while ago, and one of the things that I hope that we get to do before we leave today is talk about what topics we want to prioritize for future meetings so that we can get them on the calendar and get the appropriate invitations out and speakers, et cetera. two little announcements that I think are appropriate for this group. One is that we have a community school coordinator appreciation week is coming up. We will not meet before then, but I thought everybody should just have it on their calendar, and there'll be some things that are coming up from the coalition about activities related to this. And so I will put a link to that information in the chat. It's the week of September 15th. And then also I'm putting another link in the chat as well, which is the announcement of the new Towson State University has set up the Maryland Center for Community Schools, and there's some things and activities happening around that as well that folks may want to take part in or learn more about. So I'm having trouble grabbing my Community School Coordinator Appreciation Week link, but I will get that in just a second. I just wanted to share those, and also feel free if you have things that you want to share here, announcements from that you think are relevant to Pillar 4 that may impact other members of the advisory board, or that you think people should be paying attention to. Please feel free to share those as well. I don't know if anybody wants to do announcements right now, or if we want to jump into Emma and we can do announcements too at the end. All right, Emma. Oh, Hope, go ahead.
No, I was about to say we could do announcements at the end, because
Okay.
I know we had some topics that we had somewhat carved out, but I don't know if we finished everything.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
so-
Agree. All right, Emma. Thank you so much. So we had invited Emma, just to frame this up a little bit, to talk about the work of the Outcomes and Measurements Work Group. For those of you who may not be familiar with that, that is really the work group that kind of was designing the framework on which we were going to be collecting data and kind of deciding how to look at whether or not the blueprint is being successful and each of the pillars. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about what that framework looks like for Pillar 4, how those decisions were made, and how that is evolving now as we move forward into like really examining implementation. So Emma, I'm going to leave you with that and see where we can go from there.
Sounds good. Thank you all for having me. I just am excited to get the chance to share more about the work of the Outcome Measures Work Group, and very happy to also have Joe Manko, member Manko here, who is the vice chair of the work group and is still the vice chair of the work group. You know, Joe, if there's anything that I am missing during the conversation or anything you want to add in, please feel free to let me know, or just jump in wherever. But thank you again for having us. For having me. And I'm actually just going to go ahead and share my screen to navigate to a few places where you can learn a little bit more about the Outcome Measures Work Group and access background information, because I think that this is asked sometimes, and we want to make sure that folks know where to find these resources about the work group. So I'll share my screen and just let you know where you can find information about the Outcome Measures Work Group. It's actually in our handy dandy updated Blueprint Comprehensive Plan, which is on the AIB website. So if you go to the implementation plans tab of the Blueprint AIB website, you're going to see the 2023 Blueprint Comprehensive Plan and this image here. You all can see my screen, right? I'm just double checking that you can see what you're, okay. And click on this. You'll get, you can download your own copy of the updated plan. I should point out this is the 2023 plan. The updated version of the 2024 plan will basically be exactly the same for the content that we're going to be looking at. There's going to be a couple of changes, but that's going to be up as soon as we are able to incorporate those changes that were adopted by the board on August 1st. But then if you download the plan, you can navigate to page, double checking, page 11 And this whole section is about the outcome measures work group, the work of the outcome measures work group, and how it was developed, what it discussed during different meetings, and really how it came to identify these output and outcome measures that were adopted by the AIB, as well as data to track. And so it gives you some really helpful background information. And then it also takes you through the Blueprint outcome measure framework, which we'll go back to in a second. And then next steps of the work group, as well as a summary of the different measures by pillar. So if you go to page 15, you'll see a full list of the pillar 4 output and outcome measures. So we'll talk about that in a second. And then you can also find data that needs to be monitored at the pillar level. And we'll talk a little bit about the difference between that and output and outcome measures, but there are also measures for pillar 4 as well. So just really briefly before we get into that, I'll say that I'll come back to my screen or come back to the different components of this in just a second, but the outcome measures work group has had, oh gosh, I want to say upwards of 13, 14 meetings at least over the course of the last year and a half. And the first 10 meetings took place in the late winter and spring of 2023, and is composed of members who applied to serve on the outcome measures work group. This includes folks who work at the local levels of local education agencies and education systems, members of advocacy organizations, school leaders, district staff, students as well. We had a student member that was who was added a little earlier this year. So we're just really happy to have such a diverse group of folks, and also folks who are impacted by the Blueprint's implementation to help weigh in on the appropriate measures that should be used to track implementation and ensure that we're reaching the Blueprint's progress and outcomes. The meetings were all live streamed, and they were also open for public comment. So in terms of actually identifying the different pillar level outcomes and output measures, we sought public feedback and input. We have a Google form that's on the website, and I'll actually navigate here so you can see where this is available and still available. So this is the, again, the Blueprint website. If you go to About AIB and scroll down here to feedback opportunities, there has been and still is a Google form available here to provide feedback on the outcome measures. And so we check that before every meeting that we have, as well as on an ongoing basis. You can also email. So that's been up for a while, and we encourage as much input as possible, and are still encouraging that if folks would like to weigh in. So we had a meeting, or actually 2 meetings specific to each pillar of the outcome measures work group, as we were determining, we have this massive amount of information. We have so many different metrics that we can be, looking at. How can we identify the most critical ones that will be leading indicators of progress to help us determine, are we on the right track with regards to Blueprint implementation? Are we ensuring that the things that need to be measured are getting measured? And, are there things that we might be potentially overlooking that we need to, take into greater account? We had a couple of meetings again for each pillar, in which the first meeting we really just looked at what are the measures right now, what can we possibly be adding on here, what are some things that we're not taking into account, and then the second meeting was to really narrow down those measures and decide which ones we were going to go with, based off of members having more or less done their homework and solicited input, or taken some time to reflect on the measures and think about what would be appropriate to help assess progress. And the different type of measures, again, are really trying to help identify leading indicators of progress with regards to Blueprint implementation. I'll just show this framework around the Blueprint measures again. This is also in the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan. But ultimately, the way that we set this up was we want to make sure that we're looking at the overall outcome of the Blueprint, keeping that first and foremost at the front of our minds when we're thinking about how we're measuring progress. And we would then have overarching blueprint level outcome measures. Because when we think about the blueprint's implementation, we know that all the pillars interact and impact our ability to reach this overall outcome of ensuring that all Maryland students leave high school globally competitive and prepared for success in post-secondary education, work, and life. So there are some measures that we pull from multiple pillars when we think about whether or not we're reaching this outcome. And then, you know, thinking about it from how the different pillars, and we can measure progress with regards to pillar-specific activities, like implementation related to, for instance, Pillar 4, and ensuring that more resources are available for students to be successful and that we're reaching the goals of that, that pillar. We need to also have pillar-specific measures. Those include output measures and outcome measures that help us determine if we're reaching the pillar level expected outcome of ensuring students have resources they need to be successful. So it's just, this is really trying, again, a visual representation of how the different measures work together. You're thinking about pillar specific measures and whether we're meeting the pillar goals, but ultimately all the pillars will work together to help to meet the blueprint goal. So they're all connected and they're all important, and we shouldn't just be focusing on a single measure to determine progress. We need to be looking at measures across different pillars and between pillars as well. Okay, so I'll just scroll back down here again to the measures that the work group decided on, and then I'll stop talking so I can, you know, let you guys ask questions too. But the Pillar 4 output measures that the work group ultimately landed on, I'll just have them up here. So some of them are, you know, a little more specific to implementation activities in progress, which includes the implementation of the work groups on English learners, which I think is now the work group on multilingual learners, and demonstrating implementation of the special education work group, or the work group on instruction and services for students with disabilities, as it was previously called in the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan. So both of those work groups having so many different recommendations to help advance special education services and services for students with multilingual learners, the work group felt it was important to ensure that those recommendations were actually being implemented, and tracking that was important with regards to measuring progress in this pillar. Other things included counselor-student ratios in schools, and of the students who are assessed and determined to have behavioral health needs, the percentage who are offered documented support and services. For that, it would really be, you know, a target of 100% of students, and ensuring that this target is met. The outcome measures that the work group landed on includes of English learners, again, we're updating language here, of multilingual learners, the percentage of students who meet annual expected English proficiency targets, of students who require special education services, the percentage who meet annual expected progress on their IEPs, the rate of chronic absenteeism in community and non-community schools, and then the diversity of newly hired Maryland school counselors compared to the diversity of the student population at the state level and by LEA. In addition to these output and outcome measures, which will have targets associated with each of them, the AIB is still tracking particular data points just to assess progress over time, without necessarily setting a target for them right now. But that could change depending on how important it is as a leading indicator. You know, as we start to see, as we are continuing to see implementation progress, what is it that we're starting to see are really important leading indicators of progress, and should we be setting targets for some of these things? And so, you know, some of these might end up ultimately getting some targets, but we also identified some other, you know, important metrics related to Pillar 4 activities that we wanted to keep track of over time as well. So in terms of next steps for the work group, you know, when we set these measures, we, and when I say we, I mean when the AIB adopted these measures, when the work group recommended them, when the AIB adopted them, it's with the understanding that the blueprint is all about system change. So we are going to be learning about things as we work to transform the state education system in Maryland. We don't know everything right now. We're going to be continuing to learn about implementation over time. So, you know, as we learn, we might find that there are different measures that we need to be taking into greater account, and need to be following more closely or setting different targets around, to help advance the goals of the blueprint and ensure that we're accelerating progress. That's something that, you know, we're learning internally. That's something that we're going to be learning from our initial evaluation of the blueprint, which will be starting very soon, and kicking off very soon, because there is an interim and final evaluation of the blueprint's progress that's due, you know, and that the AIB is working on, or will be working with a partner on. So, you know, it's not like these are just the only measures and that these are set in stone and there's no possibility to ever change them. This is what came up as most important from the work group, from the members of the AIB. This is what we was seen as critical to track progress on at this time, and is still seen as very critical to track progress on. But if, again, more suggestions, other things come up that need to be tracked, that need to have targets associated with them to help advance the work of the blueprint, will the AIB will consider that, and, you know, potentially raise those up as measures to track progress on. So just wanted to emphasize that. The work group is also going to be working on setting targets for these metrics moving forward. And I know I've been talking a lot, so I hesitate to go down this road, and explain further. But basically, the AIB and MSDE have also been working on setting targets for metrics between their respective plans that are aligned, to ensure that there's not one target set by the AIB and one target set by the State Department and the State Board of Education, even though they're measuring the same thing. We want things to be aligned, and for there to be, you know, common understanding of what the goal is at the state and local levels. So that's been work that we've been undertaking since around February, and targets were adopted at the June State Board of Education and AIB meeting for those aligned metrics. One of those being actually chronic absenteeism. One metric that the State Board and AIB suggested that we go back to the table on, or back to square one on, I guess you could say, or relook at, was counselor-student ratios in schools. That's something that we want to look a little bit more closely at in terms of setting a target, to really understand when we're talking about the role of a counselor, what positions are we talking about, and what should the appropriate ratio be between school counselors and students in schools to ensure you know, their greatest possible impact, and ensure that students are getting the services that they need. So, you know, that work is still ongoing, but we have targets, at least for those aligned metrics. Now that that has happened, we're going to be moving forward with metrics that are not necessarily shared between MSD and AIB, but that were adopted by the AIB solely in their Blueprint Comprehensive Plan. There's also other metrics that we have not been able to set targets for because we don't have source data for that yet, or we're, you know, there needs to be new understanding or guidance around what the particular metric is for things like, for instance, participation in post-college and career readiness pathways. What does this mean? What are we calling participation? What are we calling completion? How do we count that? Because until we know how we count that, we can't be setting a goal, because we need to see what, you know, the baseline data is to be able to set those targets. So it's complicated, and it's an ongoing process. I think that, you know, one of the things that we need to, you know, really, it's hard to track everything and set targets for everything. It's, you know, we want to, you know, keep that understanding of it takes time potentially to track these things and to set targets and to get the baseline data that we need to be able to set targets. But if it's significant and important and critical to the overall blueprints implementation, we want to make sure that those are elevated and heard, and we certainly look into those. So I've talked a lot. I will pause and see if you guys have any questions.
I'll start you off with a question and then open the floor, Emma.
Okay, great.
Something like attendance or chronic absenteeism is obviously one that we think is very highly associated with the implementation of community schools. And in fact, so many of the community schools are really targeting chronic absenteeism as part of their, needs assessments and what's coming out. Does that exist somewhere else in the document? And so it's like such a high level thing that multiple things could feed into chronic absence, right? Also healthcare, all sorts of things. Just curious as to where that outcome measure might sit, if it is one of the measures that is being looked at. And then also student mobility. I know that we have this little research practice network, and one of our members, Dante de Tablon, did his dissertation work and looked at the impact of community schools on student mobility. And that was, interesting to see that that students are potentially staying in schools more when they have the community school model fully kind of implemented. So those were two just outcomes. I was curious, like, are they anywhere else in the document, or is that something that could be added as a potential pillar for outcome measure?
Yeah, absolutely. So rate of chronic absenteeism in community and non-community schools is a pillar 4 outcome measure. It's also
Great.
one of the ones that overlaps with the State Board of Education's metrics from their strategic plan. So it
Great.
was part of the set of aligned metrics that we were.
It's just not one of the data it's an outcome measure. It's not one of the additional data to monitor. That's the list I was looking at before. Yeah. Okay. Got it.
Yep. It's under the outcome measures and
yeah,
setting targets in alignment with the State Board of Education's metrics. The data to monitor, I don't think that mobility was in there. I'm just going to double check. I think that there could be things that are related to mobility, right? Like I would imagine that there's potentially a correlation. I'm not trying to, determine whether or not this is a relationship or not. I think you'd need to look into this more, but when we're thinking about things like family reports of feeling welcome or family reports of feeling confident in supporting their children's learning in community schools, I'm sure that those are factors that could influence student mobility. But in terms of the student mobility rate, that's not currently something that is a data to track. And I wonder about setting a target for that. Maybe it's something that we could track initially to see what improvements are happening there. And then if it would make sense to, look at, is this something that a target should be set at, or at least should individual community schools? I don't know.
And I don't know how that data is collected currently. Like, is there somewhere a report that says what the student mobility rate is by school? There may not be. I mean, that might not exist yet.
Yeah.
So, just to of course, I'm glad the attendance piece is on there, because I do think that's one of the most research-based pieces. But I want to open the floor to others to ask questions.
So my question is about the counselor-student ratio. Are we speaking about school counselors by themselves, or the people who can provide counseling services student ratio? That could look different in different LEAs.
I think that this was a question that actually came up during the board meeting. Joe, did you want to say, or Member Minko, I apologize, you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, this is, you've really hit on something, Hope, that got brought up in the board meeting. And one of the reasons why this was kind of kicked back to do some further investigation, because, it was brought up in the board meeting that there are official school counselors that are functioning in schools, but there are also a lot of these there's folks that are contractors, either through local nonprofits that are providing either some kind of mentoring support or career counseling or college counseling. So, really like delving into that information more to get a better accounting of like, who are all of the individuals that exist at a school that are working in a more personalized fashion with students to provide some kind of mentoring, career counseling, academic support that extends beyond just the FTE count for a like official documented school-based counselor within a school. Because I think without including all of those additional contractors and support personnel, you're really losing a lot of the story. So I think that's something that was brought up, and that the team was asked to explore further so that we could get a better accounting of like what actually is going on in the schools and what the ratios authentically look like.
And then my other thing with that is just, it's one of these things where two things could be true at the same time. Making sure that, are we looking at this from the lens of those that are supporting students with college career and being citizen ready versus those that are helping with just behavioral and mental health service. So there are some that are now with just the career side, that is that counseling support of that career and college and citizen readiness. And then there are some that are there to support with just mental health needs that students may have or families may have. And so that lends through many different parts of the blueprint. So I would also want us to know, like for Pillar 4, are we focusing on those that are providing those behavioral health services? Because then that would, like I know, and like I'm in Montgomery County, we have schools that have the non linkages to learning, and then their sister school might have something that's bridge to wellness, and that's agencies through DHHS. But we also have schools that have well-being social workers. Then we also have social workers that work with early childhood and special education. So just making sure that we can delineate just a little bit more, because I think we might actually be missing some of the people if we just say the counselor student ratio that's focused on maybe just the career side and not the totality of also those behavioral and mental health services.
Oops, sorry. I think the intent originally, and I believe that this is still the intent, is to measure the ratio of with regards to behavioral health and mental health supports. Because when we're thinking about career counseling and the career coaches who are part of that counseling, that's Pillar 3. So since this lives in Pillar 4, I think we were thinking more mental health and behavioral health services that are provided by counselors.
So then I think we would probably need to look at that, not just saying counselor to student ratio, but those that provide counselor services in a building to student ratio. Because right now, I think a lot of our school counselors, regardless of level, are now kind of pull a little bit more towards that career side. And in some places they're on the behavioral side. But because of the lift of Pillar 3, they might be more on that side than the behavioral. And now we have all these other agencies that kind of align to the consortium grant who are doing the other stuff for the Pillar 4 side of it. So just making sure that we do kind of delineate that maybe to like, what is the ratio of people who can provide counseling services to the students in the building on a consistent manner. I think we'll get more cleaner data that way. And then the connection to all the state grants, like through the consortium, enough grants, different things that are coming out right now. We'll be able to see how that actually aligns to the blueprint.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for elevating that distinction. That's really important and something that we need to make sure is really clear when we are describing the measure and the data that's resulting, that it's based in. We'll have to be very clear in the description.
I have a question around the data collection for some of the things that were mentioned. So when you think about school-based health center, how is data being collected to identify that it is a support system in place to assist scholars? I know some districts have like Hazel Health, or you have a school-based nurse, but does it extend past that? What additional things fall under the school-based health center? And then when we talk about the point that was just made by Hope in regard to the those providing counseling services to students, again, just looking at around the data collection around that in order to speak to whether or not it's benefiting scholars at all. It makes me question whether or not the data that I'm collecting will speak to the blueprint at all. So what are some thoughts around how the data should be collected and whether or not it speaks to support of students?
So in terms of the measures and the data that's being collected for school-based health centers. We're still, and I think I said this earlier, but this is definitely one of those measures that we're still trying to figure out how can we collect data, and what is the best way to collect data for this measure. The data that is collected, and we're actually going to get some updates on that soon, that we know is collected is the number of students who are served by school-based health centers, right? That data is collected, it goes to the Department of Health, and that's collected on a yearly basis. But this measure of, well, I'll just read it again really quickly, just to make sure I have the exact wording correct, but it's about tracking the students who are assessed and determined to have behavioral health needs and are then offered documented support and services, which could, I think, take place through a school-based health center, or it could be, I imagine, another entity too. So we need to, that is not as clear as to how we would do that, but we are going to be looking into that and still trying to figure out how that data can be collected. So I can provide an update when we're able to answer that question, but I don't have a ton of information right now for you. I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. I just had a few thoughts as you were sharing, because of course we have the school-based health center, but then we also have other avenues that we go through to provide student support through intervention process. So if we need to create a student plan, if there is a behavior contract, if we're going to implement behavior supports through before we get to a special education area, there's some response to intervention things that are done. So schools can definitely have that type of data. It's just about putting it somewhere that it will be accessible, because some of those things may be internal or filed, and so just finding ways that it can be accessible, as it would be a suspension, because that is automatically put somewhere. But I don't know about all of the other support systems that we do at the schoolhouse, if all of that is necessarily being tracked in a way that's visible to everyone.
And it could be that if it's not being tracked but needs to be tracked, it might be a while before we're able to set up a target, because we would need to first set up the system to ensure that it is being tracked, so we can actually have baseline data. So that's part of, and that's why sometimes these measures are taking a while longer than we would like to set targets for them. But if we could follow up and talk a little more as we explore different ways to collect data for these measures, Dr. Grant, I would really appreciate the opportunity to talk more about that, and with everyone in the work group. But yeah, some of the ideas that you were raising and considerations are really key.
Other questions? Interested in our student members' reactions to the Pillar 4 outcomes. You may need time to process them, and if you do, you can always reach out to the team later. But if you have any thoughts you want to share, always want to hear those voices.
And if you have any suggested additional measures or things to be looking at that are not, again, captured here, please feel free to submit them through the form that's on the website, but also just email, or we can come back again to talk more about this. There's definitely, if there's things that aren't being elevated that are critical indicators of progress for implementation, we want to be thinking about those.
And I was chatting with Lisa in the background. We all got the hard copy books, and which I love hard copy things personally. I'm old school like that. I like to thumb paper and tab things, etc. And she said that the new members of the team will also get those hard copy books in the mail to you if you want. So I'm sure that will be exciting when it arrives to your desk, as it was for me. I had a question again about the sort of cross-cutting thing, because I know that we have these pillars in our minds, But oftentimes the pillars interact with one another. And actually college and career readiness, as Hope was bringing up, is one of those spaces. And more we're hearing that particularly the high school community school coordinators, of which there are several new coming on this year, are really working a lot in that college and career readiness space, because that is what's being identified as a need through the needs assessments at the high schools. So it could be that finding partnerships for apprenticeships or internships is part of the community school coordinators work. Does that just end up getting captured in pillar 3 outcomes? How would that work? To think, I mean, I just think about maybe there's a developmental difference between what elementary and middle and high school community schools are accomplishing that we might want to be thinking about a little bit and how we're looking at them.
And Elliot, I'm sorry, would you mind just sharing like, I just want to make sure I got that right. So it's the outcomes with regards to community schools.
There may be some outcomes related to, particularly in the high school community schools, that would actually be related to college and career readiness, as opposed to
Okay.
as opposed to the sort of more
Got it.
social emotional kinds of pieces that are kind of more what you're looking at there. So for instance, and it may fall just into the, you know, into the buckets of partnerships that are developed, right? But it's just going to be, it's been interesting to me, and I don't think I had anticipated this, because that we just didn't have that many high school community schools before the blueprint, to be honest. That just that didn't really, there were a few, but not very many. But more and more, as I'm hearing the community schools report out about what their actual activities are related to their community schools at the high school level, so much of it is workforce readiness. It's haircuts and clothing. It's interviewing and matchmaking. It's bringing in cert programs that are providing paid work experiences. That's kind of what we're hearing is happening at the high school level with the community school partnerships. So I'm just thinking that there may be, like, I hadn't even thought about this before myself. There may be just differences between what is accomplished in community schools at a elementary versus middle versus high school level.
It sounds like, and I think that we've, you know, I think we've committed to disaggregating data as much as possible. And there's specific measures by which we are disaggregating data and explicitly saying it by community schools. Like for chronic absenteeism, we explicitly say distinguishing between community and non-community schools, just to, you know, elevate that. That's something we want to ensure we're tracking. But I think that for some of these other things that you're sharing, other implementation outcomes and activities, we can certainly disaggregate by community schools as well, and ensure that there's reporting around the outcomes for community school students with some of these specific measures.
Right. So some of the pillar 3 outcomes could get disaggregated by community school and not community school.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. And something that we can definitely do. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks.
I'm gonna write that down. I'm sure I got that. Any other questions or anything at all?
No, this is really helpful, Emma, to have this look at this piece of it, and just to kind of juice our own brains. I hadn't looked at it for a while myself, obviously, so I think this is like a good refresher for me, and now I feel like I want to jump back in and look at it again and think through it again too. You know, we're always learning all the time.
The only other thing, and this is not necessarily just for pillar 4, but it rises to us to think about, with the different grants that come out from the state that have a component that are aligned to anything with the pillars, community schools, non-community schools, behavioral health services. are we going to be looking at the evidence of those grants and their impact on the blueprint implementation and support? For instance, we've got the consortium grant that came out, and LEA's different agencies got that. The Enough grant is being out right now, where people are applying for that. I think the applications for 2 of the tracks are September 20th. All of those have some component tied to community schools or behavioral health or college and career, and they lay in all these pillars. So is it a way, or is the AIB looking at all these grants that come out from the state level, how they actually correlate to the support of the blueprint in the end as well?
So that's a really good question. I think that the consortium has identified its own set of accountability metrics that it wants to, use to help track progress for consortium activities, and we're going to provide input as well if there's anything that could need to be elevated as well, outside of the metrics that they're proposing, to look at implementation progress and how it's advancing the blueprint's goals. And then in terms of these other grant activities, like, as you said, the Enough grant, I don't think we have explicit measures for those now, but definitely something that we should be looking at, and if there's just ways to track what any connection it has with, advancing the blueprint outcomes and what kind of things we're seeing with that grant program. For others, there's definitely tracking that occurs. It's hard to capture everything in these lists of measures. We really tried to look at what isn't being currently tracked and what we need to elevate potentially. And there's a lot of different reports and different metrics that are shared or captured through the blueprint's implementation. There's reports on the Maryland Teaching Fellows Scholarship that looks at, applicants and diversity of applicants. There's reports on teacher collaborative grants. There's reports on just so many things that we haven't really even captured here in these measures, but they are captured in the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan, the big 201-page document that is super easy to get through in one sitting. But yeah, there's a lot of things that we can that are currently being tracked, and but if there are gaps of things that still need to be tracked, we'd like to hear your suggestions for things that we should be looking at if we aren't already tracking them.
Yeah, I just wanted us to be kind of mindful that there could be things that come out that are actually tracked in both areas, but how they review them or could be the total opposite ends of how the data is reported out. That would drive, I know, LEAs and school principals probably wild with, oh my God, this one is asking me the same thing, but the way they're interpreting it compared to another one. So I just wanted to see if it could be one that actually kind of encompasses all of it for stuff that is aligned across all areas.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. We were just talking about that a little earlier today in a call of ensuring that we're streamlining reporting processes and as much as possible. I don't think we're ever going to be perfect or things are ever going to be perfect, but we want to eliminate any redundancies as much as we can.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Any other last thoughts for Emma? Well, then we will let her go. Thank you so much. This has been a long time coming. I know we've tried to do this a couple times, and now we actually have accomplished it. We can check this one off, except for that it's ongoing, so that we'll have to revisit it at some time.
Yeah.
But really appreciate your time, Emma. We'll make as you said, all the work group meetings are posted, just like all the other meetings, and so folks are interested in following along and participating. Please do. So I think our next task here is to elect a chair and co-chair, or chair and vice chair is the language, right, Lisa? I had the pleasure of serving as vice chair with Chandra the past year. Really, chair and vice chair's role is to help set the agendas for these meetings, and kind of play co-host to the agenda itself. So just making sure things move along and that we are engaging everybody and all that kind of stuff. So I guess I would ask if there's anybody who would be interested in this role, in one or the other roles. I don't know, Lisa, do you have an official process by which we do this?
So yes, I want to give a little bit of a description and
perfect.
Okay. So upon the formation of the advisory committees, the organization and setup of the committees is determined by each advisory committee themselves. The committee is responsible for creating the meeting agenda, like Ellie said, and by selecting discussion topics around Pillar 4 and other topics relating to the blueprint implementation that you all believe would be beneficial for us to explore as a committee. And also inviting guest speakers to present at these meetings as well. So with that being said, the AIB asks that a conversation is held annually to discuss leadership roles to allow the committee to engage in a conversation about rotating roles. So there is no requirement to rotate. It is really a conversation among members about the various leadership opportunities. And you can discuss it now if you would like, or if anyone feels more comfortable, they can email me or contact me to share their interest in a leadership role. And like Ellie said, that is the vice chair and the chair overall roles.
Should we do that? Should we have folks email Lisa if they're interested in taking on a leadership role within and then Lisa, we can actually table that to the next meeting to discuss.
That
But
sounds good.
What we should do in the interim though is use this last little remaining bit of time to review the topic areas that we've discussed in the past, and then maybe set dates for them, and also get new topic ideas from the new members. And Hope, you can keep me honest here, but I believe the two topics that we have not covered that were on our list originally were to get an update from the ELL work group, and so the English Language Learners work group, and
Yes.
From key leaders at MSDE and others that have been involved in the implementation of the recommendations of that work group. And then the other topic, and this is a biggie, one of my favorites, is what is next for the neighborhood indicators of poverty work, the how do we count poverty in Maryland conversation.
Yep.
That has also been kind of changed a little bit by the legislative process last session, where they identified a role for GOC in taking on that determination. And so that's what I had left on my list.
That's right.
Because we've done now the outcomes and measurements work group, and we've done the community schools deep dive in June. So I don't know if we want to kind of figure out when we want to do those topics, and also again open the floor to anybody else for topics they want to bring forward, and then we can help identify kind of who the right guests are to come speak to us about those things.
Those were definitely the topics. I would say September, and this is just me, but I would suggest the Emerging Multilingual Learner Group, English Learner Group, to come September, where it's still fresh in the school year, beginning of the school year, something that we haven't addressed yet. And then the one that we have not talked about bringing was someone from the special education side, which we really probably need to talk about that, since that is an outcome measure, and they also have that as an output measure in here, getting some information from that work group would be beneficial, especially when it comes to probably identification or over identification areas that they are looking at across all the LEAs around students with IEPs as well. And so I would think that one in October, and then the big group maybe in, I don't know if is it November, December, November that we have the meeting, could be the other big group that we talked about coming.
Yeah, I
The
think that's
neighborhood
great.
indicators.
The
Yeah.
neighborhood indicators. I think that's good because we also want to let GSC get through their enough grants. They might not want
That's what I was
to,
thinking.
may not want to come before October because I think that's the second set of deadlines, right?
Second, the last deadline is November 1st.
Okay, so in our November meeting, which we'll have to look at to make sure it's not in conflict with Thanksgiving, because just timing wise, we just might want to look at that date. I think that sounds great. The other suggestion I was going to make is we could potentially do the ELL and special ed work groups together if
I think that's
we,
too big.
you think it's too big. Okay,
That's too big.
I'm down with that. But also open to other suggestions for discussion topics from the floor.
So while everyone is thinking about their topics, I'm going to piggyback on Ellie's point about the 2 dates, specifically in November and December. The meeting dates are falling right in the middle of the holiday break time. So the Thanksgiving break meeting is right before the Thanksgiving break, and the same for Christmas time. The meeting is falling on Christmas Eve. So just to set calendars, it is suggested that the Pillar holds their November meeting on the November 18th or the 19th. And for December, it would be the 17th.
I'm good with all of that.
I am too.
Okay.
Both of those work for me for November and December. And that's
Okay.
the dates I actually was looking at.
Okay, great. I'm also going to share the meeting dates for the year with the committee.
Dr. Grant and Ms. Jones, would that work for you? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank
You're
you.
welcome.
All right, so go back to your discussion on future topics.
Other topic suggestions? Things that you've just really wanted to always know about from the Pillar 4 blueprint world.
I have a question, but I don't really know how to word it. So I know we've been talking about like mental health, community schools, and like that aspect, but what about like the physical like environment of like schools?
When you say physical environment, do you mean the building space or
Like
physical?
no, not like the building space, but like the health of the building. Like okay, this
Like
is not
air quality?
this is like, not to talk bad about my school, but like my school has mold and mildew like everywhere. And like, is there like something that people can do about that?
Yes, so it's multiple things. For this one, I can say the reason why we focus on the topics we talked about, because that's part of our pillar work for
Mhm.
Pillar 4. But what you're asking about would be things that you would actually speak to with, I think you said you were the student board member
It
or
would just
student?
be like just the Board of Education.
Yeah, you would actually take it there, and then you also would actually want to meet with your facilities leadership team to give them that information and then create an action committee on that at your school that way. Well, in your county that way.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. That's
Yeah,
not a bad question.
unfortunately, the blueprint doesn't really address school buildings at all. There was separate legislation, the Build to Learn, and that's we're blowing through that quicker than it anticipated. That was designed to help spur renovations and rebuilding of schools. And the state has underfunded the CIP for schools for years. ACLU will tell you all about it. So email me and I can put you in touch with some of the people who have done some of the advocacy on the building side of the work of schools. But I actually think it was a missed opportunity for the blueprint to address facilities. But it unfortunately doesn't so much, which is a kind of a, you know, we talk about world-class schools and then we send kids to buildings that are not world-class sometimes. But I'm happy to connect you further with people who have done a lot of work on the physical building advocacy.
I was going to ask a question about like the special education. I know that when we talk about special education, the other avenue is the related service piece. And so are we going to talk about, like, you know, and I like how Hope brought it up about, you know, just the overrepresentation in special education, but also looking at the different categories in which they are, quote unquote, you know, under. We can look at it from a special education point, but are we going to look at it from a related service point as well, when we're looking at like speech, OT, PT as well? Just wonder if there's going to be, is that encompassed in that meeting, or is there another topic that we can add to the agenda moving forward?
That's why I said, actually, I'm in line with what you just said, because that's why I thought that the two meetings couldn't be together, because that I was in my head putting those together with the special education with the
Okay.
community service, and that alone would be the full meeting. That's why I thought that. So
Okay. And then I was also thinking about attendance or truancy. Would that also be, like, I know resources provided, is that just wanted to add that as another topic area
I think that's a good one
to
to
the
add,
agenda.
definitely. And what are some things that are already in place across other LEAs that are working that could
Right.
be a great thing to share out?
Right. I know, you know, just from personal experience, it's more about like, oh, we're just gonna have a truancy case, we're gonna take them to court. So just want to provide more resources to the community as well as the parent in order to help them. So I like what you said, Hope, about, you know, what is working in other LEAs as opposed to others. So yeah.
I think that's a good topic for probably December,
Mm.
because it will probably be some good information that could be shared out. Right, you know, you're coming back from a winter break where all of a sudden attendance does another shift when you're in the schools. That's Dr. Grant shaking her head. You know how it is once you return from after winter break.
Right.
So let me just capture that idea. So we're talking about like what's actually really being effective, what's moving the needle across schools and school districts and community schools and et cetera around the attendance piece. Is that? Yeah, I love that.
And maybe just like revisiting some of the processes too. I know that different districts do it. LEAs do it differently. And so maybe just revisiting it as well could be something that is also discussed.
Great. Well, it sounds like at least we have our topics for 24 all set. And I think it probably makes sense to just revisit. There's always going to be one meeting that gets rescheduled. It's just going to happen. But I think you know, now that we've anticipated the challenge, maybe not, because now we've anticipated our challenges with November, December, we'll be able to move forward nicely. So we'll write these up. If you have suggestions of people attached to these topics that you think would be really great experts to bring, please let us know, because we're going to want to have kind of a little presentation, a little conversation, and having the people who really know what's happening. We'll also ask the AIB to help us find the right people, and they've done that in the past for us. So just if you have somebody off the top of your head who you think would be a really great guest, please send that name to Lisa. And Lisa, I'll do a little summary of the topics for each month, as I have done before. That way, we'll and I think we should make the invites for the ELL folks. I think we had some names attached to that previously, and I'll go back to my notes and see who we were trying to invite for that one, so that we can get that one on the books and invitation sent sooner rather than later.
Right. And I have a suggestion for a speaker for the special ed work group discussion.
Great. Great. Well, I think that is pretty much our agenda today. Just reminder to send Lisa your interest if you want to serve as chair or vice chair. Send Lisa any speakers that you want. I will do a summary of the kind of topics and the dates. And yeah, I think that's it for the moment.
Welcome to our new team members.
Yay, I know. I'm excited to have a full house. It's great. So yeah, let's adjourn for today, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody again in September, and hopefully with that ELL topic on our books. All right, folks. This was a great meeting, by the way. I loved how much info and feedback was provided. So
Thank you all so
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, going to now stop recording.